Growing Up Weird.
Hi, and welcome to Growing Up Weird, the podcast where we explore how the earliest chapters of Western childhoods shape the health stories that we then carry into our adulthoods. I'm Dr. Greg Dickens, scientist and consultant in medical innovation, and I am here with Dr. Gwen Bradbury.
Hello.
Who is a healthcare researcher, author, and your guide through the science stories and traditional strategies that connect childhood beginnings to lifelong good health. Each week, we dig into the newest evidence, understand how it links together, and walk through some of the changes that we in the West could make to give kids decades of better health. So, whether you're a parent, a teacher, a healthcare professional, or simply curious about how the body and brain develop over time, you're in the right place. Are you ready? Have you got a cup of tea? Good.
This time, we're not beginning, as ever, with the news. I think we begin with a little bit of a summary, because this one goes all over the place, and it is important. It is a dark and stormy night just after Halloween. It's dark, it's cold, and all over the country, wee bairns and tiny kiddies have bowls of Halloween candy. This is a story all about that Halloween candy. Sugar is addictive, an appetite stimulant, messes with your metabolic health for your entire life, and it does drive the top 5 killers of people in the Western world. So we're going to talk about today the second big win, which is cutting sugar out of kids' lives. Right, bear with us. We're going to start with the news. Gwen, have you got news?
I do, and then, to be honest, I'm looking forward to the fact that it's a really positive one.
I also have a positive one. A week of good news, perhaps.
Absolutely. Just, post-Halloween, when it's all windy and wet and dark outside, we all need something to lift our spirits.
To be clear, dear listener, it is currently very dark and very cold and very horrible outside. You can't step outside without the kind of noise happening. So yeah, come on, let's have a spirit-lifting one from you, Gwen.
Okay, so this is a paper that was published last week in the journal Pediatrics by Gabraszewski et al. Hopefully got that right, from the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And they asked the question, has the recent change in guidelines about introducing peanuts and other allergies earlier made a difference to childhood food allergy?
Intent hooks, tell me.
Yes, so they did a huge observational study. They looked at groups of children born between 2012 and 2014, 2015, 2017 to 2019.
Okay.
And the guidelines were introduced in 2017. And they compared children born before, where the advice was not to give them peanuts for a very long time, no peanuts, to those afterwards, where the advice was get peanuts in pretty early.
Yep.
And what they found was that there was a really big reduction in the rates of peanut allergy and other food allergies with the advice to introduce allergens earlier.
So hang on, the allergy advice wasn't just peanuts.
Wasn't just peanuts.
So
no.
we can't take from this that giving kids peanuts makes them okay, good, fine. This makes sense. How big's really big?
So 35% reduction risk. Yeah, which is massive, especially when you look at how surveys at the time found that people were responding to the guidelines.
Okay.
So after the guidelines were published, only about 29% of general pediatricians, so general child doctors, about 65% of allergists, and only 17% of caregivers said that they were in favour of introducing peanuts before age 7 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I think this is something that it's quite easy to overlook. The guidelines change, but there's a long time before you get public opinion change. And so these results are in the context of that general skepticism. So this is like a great effect, but there will be lots of people who didn't do it.
That's fascinating. So are these people who see the new guidelines and still think, you know what, I know better?
So you know what, I had a conversation with a friend of mine quite a few years ago, actually probably around the time we were learning about early introduction of food allergens. And she had a life-threatening peanut allergy.
Yeah.
And so I was saying how exciting it was, to see the new research and the new guidelines. about introducing peanuts earlier. And she said, yeah, especially for her, but I didn't say that explicitly. And she said, I would never do that to my child.
Ooh.
Yeah, she said the risk is just too great. And that was fascinating. And you can kind of see her perspective. She spent her entire life terrified that she might have something gets into her food that kills her.
Sure.
And so when she becomes a parent, that fear, even however, irrational for her, but unhelpful in this context, is still very much there.
Yeah.
And so I think that was the point where I was like, oh my goodness, this is gonna be a really big. It's gonna take a while for public opinion to change, and is one of the challenges with any public health recommendations, especially when they're generally founded on like people trying to do the right thing. But there's a long old history, and there'll be stuff today that we do that in 20 years we'll be like, I cannot believe we did that. But changing public opinion can be the hardest part of changing academic perspectives and all of that.
And even through all of that, a 35%.
Even through all of that, 35% reduction. So I thought that was just really good news. So folks, if you have a small baby and you're thinking, when should I introduce allergens? The answer is soon.
Yeah.
And what we did with our kids was we used tiny smear of peanut butter, tiny bit of chewed up egg. We introduced all of the top 7 allergens before they even approach weaning. So we did it 3 to 4 months just to make sure, just in tiny quantities, not to make me eat it, just to make me exposed.
Yeah. And I should go back to my my comment there about thinking you know better than guidelines. Occasionally, you will know better than guidelines. Like, especially if those guidelines were written before 1980.
Yeah.
There are a bunch of guidelines still active out there, still the recommended thing, that are just nonsense.
I mean, even now, we will definitely talk about this on other podcasts where we're like, it says this, the evidence says this, the guidelines haven't caught up. But in this case, the guideline kind of caught up, and it's really effective. So brilliant.
That's cool.
So what's yours? I could do with another.
Okay, another
lifting one.
Another boost. The whole world and their dog now knows about telomeres. The little bits on the end of your chromosomes that protect them from the ticking clock of the fact that they degrade every time they replicate.
Mm-hmm.
Every time they replicate, they lose 1 unit off the end, and your telomeres are there to protect you from that. Longer telomeres have long been seen as a marker of good health because they show that either your cells aren't being forced to replicate so often because they are looking after themselves, they're not being damaged so much, they're in a more maintenance sort of chemical setup, to contrast to the kind of growth and death setup that you get into if your body's really stressed out. Mm-hmm. So you've got more telomere left over. Or because, as some people are desperately spending billions of dollars on, your body has been maintaining your telomeres and keeping you forever young. There is some debate about whether or not this is true, but it is certainly true that longer telomeres equate to better health.
Mm-hmm.
So, a lot of people trying to get longer telomeres.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are set up in childhood with longer telomeres, you generally have better health throughout life.
Okay, all right.
A study in pediatric research published 4 days ago by Desiree Valera-Gran and a large team out of the Universidad Miguel Hidera in Alicante.
Okay.
I'm doing this off the top of my head because I
Very
have
closed
the pad. Thank you. They looked at the link between exercise or extracurricular running about before the age of 4 and telomere length at 8.
Okay, all right.
It's not telomere length in adulthood. It's not been that long a study. They did their best, give them the chance. But there is pretty good evidence that if you have maintained longer telomeres in later childhood, you're set up well.
Yeah.
And they looked at how much exercise do you have to do to maintain telomeres.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some kids in their study doing things like 31 METs. If we're not familiar with METs,
Can't say I am.
those are metabolic equivalent, what does it stand for again? Metabolic equivalent tasks. Now, 1 hour of resting is 1 MET,
Okay.
right? So if your extracurricular activity is sitting around resting for 2 hours,
You will get 2 mets.
That is 2 mets.
Okay, all right. So 31 mets. There are not 31 hours in a day, so I can tell you that they're not just sitting.
Indeed. And this was not their metabolic equivalent of the whole day.
Okay.
It's just the amount of metabolic equivalent exercise / fun, running around, having a nice time that they were doing outside of their first year of school.
Okay. Right. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Not including sleeping, not including school or playtimes, any of that, just how much they were doing outside of school.
Okay.
And there are some kids in the study doing 30 hours, 30 mets.
30 mets.
So that's a significant amount of
A
belt.
lot of running around.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
And they suspected that that would have some effect on their telomeres. So they questionnaire these kids.
Okay.
Well, they didn't. They questionnaire their parents. And it was an in-person thing. None of this online tick boxing, I'll make stuff up. It's very much the interviewer is looking into my eyes. I shall not lie. And they talked about classes. They talked about time spent playing. All of these things added up. And you know that I said this was a good news study.
Mm-hmm.
The good news is it really doesn't take much.
Okay.
The telomere effect is seen in the kids who moved around in the highest third of their study cohort of about 550 kids.
Okay.
Top third doesn't sound great until you realize the bottom third weren't doing anything.
Okay.
Middle third were doing very, very little.
Okay.
And top third is what we would consider normal, right? So they go to the park for a little bit on their way home from school. Or they would have a dance class once a week and have a nice walk with their folks at the weekend.
Right. Okay.
It doesn't take much. And this is the good news that I'm trying to share here. Sure, there are benefits to bone strength, coordination, general fitness, immunological fitness, vitamin D, everything that come with spending a lot of time doing extracurricular, walking around, having a nice time playing in the park, being with your parents. But if you're just looking for that telomere effect and that marker of improved cellular health, it's easy to get.
Yeah.
It's just having a play at the park on your way home from school, or having a dance class once a week and going for nice walks.
Love it.
There you go. There's my nice piece of good news. Let's move on to the main thrust of today's podcast. This is the second, if I remember rightly, of our 3 easy wins.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What was the exact title of them?
So we call them no-brainer wins to improve child health.
That's the one. No-brainers. The first one was on shoes. How you're looking for flexibility, width, and how kids can learn to not accept any shoe that's not going to be good for them.
Exactly, yeah.
Today's one, if I've read the notes correctly, alliterates. It's not shoes, it's sugar.
It is sugar.
Tell us more about sugar.
So we're talking about sugar because I would say it is the single biggest thing that you can do to set your children up for better long-term health. And no, it's not giving them sugar, Greg. It's not giving them sugar.
That was not my face. My face was, I agree. How do I say that I agree without just sounding like I'm a little fanboy? I utterly agree. Having read the evidence on this, having seen that sugar-induced liver failure and liver transplant is going up by roughly 1% a year, having seen the enormous effect to me of quitting sugar, I utterly agree. So no, I was not suggesting we should intervene by giving people huge amounts of sugar.
Well, I think this evening, let's talk very briefly about why sugar is bad for kids beyond dental health, which I think has been, certainly that was the message we grew up with when we were kids.
Yeah, right? Which is the tip of the iceberg.
The absolute tip of the iceberg. In fact, it's the one aspect about sugar that I often forget.
Yeah.
When I'm like, these are all the reasons that you really, really need to cut your own sugar consumption down and preferably never introduce it to your kids until they're at a stage where they can make their own decisions around health and they know how to make healthy decisions around the food.
Yep.
But I always forget about caries.
Yeah.
But caries is the one that, really is top of mind for people.
What's a caries?
Caries is dental cavities. So if you eat a lot of sugar, the sugar sticks in your, the sugar moves into the biofilm on your teeth.
You know what I'm going to ask.
Go for it.
Do you want the biofilm?
A biofilm. Okay, so let me tell you about the dental pellicle. This is a very great, incredibly structured biological system containing. You're the expert on this. So you just look at me.
I'm happy to run to the
I'm going to say it's got bacteria.
Yeah.
It's got slime that holds the bacteria.
Yeah.
It's got mineral deposits.
Yeah.
And all of these things live together, sit on your teeth. When you put sugar on them, the bacteria chomp them up, make acid, irritate your teeth.
Perfect.
Tell me why I'm wrong.
No, I wasn't. I was going to just say it's done in funky layers. Your proteins arrive within seconds. Your first bacteria lodge in within minutes. Your second layer of macroglobulin type proteins and second layer of bacteria lodge in within hours. It builds up and builds up. And it's only after a couple of days that you start to get those calcium and phosphorus, calcium phosphate deposits that make it hard to get off the teeth.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, the biofilm is called plaque.
Okay.
After that, the biofilm is called calculus or tartar.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a heck of a lot harder to get off the teeth.
Mm-hmm.
The reason you want to worry about it is that the thicker and harder it gets, the better it is at turning sugar into acid. You have enzymes in your mouth that break down any old starch into sugar. And if you have biofilm there, if you have thick old biofilm there, that'll break down into acid and get to your teeth.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, it won't.
Oh, thank you. There you go, listeners. A very quick run through of sugar, teeth, and cavities or caries. But that's not really why we are super keen to talk about sugar. And the reason for that is that for many years, sugar has been linked with metabolic disease, with type 2 diabetes, with heart disease, with basically every single non-communicable disease of humanity, including osteoarthritis, pregnancy outcomes. Sugar really does affect many different aspects of health. But it's not been quite clear how. And also when people have tried to do research into sugar on its own, they found that there are other factors contributing. So it's not that sugar is the only thing that drives it, but it is a really major thing that drives it. And that's what I want to talk about briefly today.
Yep, let's have it.
So the current best hypothesis for tying together all of the different parts of food, nutrition, and non-communicable disease, or chronic disease, is something called the fructose survival hypothesis.
By R.L. Johnson.
By R.J. Johnson of University of Colorado. But don't worry, R.L. Johnson, I'm sure he won't take it too
I was thinking maybe of R.L. Stein.
So this hypothesis was first talked about in wasn't first talked about. It's been published in a bunch of papers since about 2010, 2015, but recently there have been some major papers come out in big journals like the Journal of Obesity, Journal of, I think, Obesity Medicine, and other ones. But what this says is that the major chemical inside cells that leads to non-communicable disease is fructose, which is half of the molecule that we call table sugar. And when fructose is metabolized, it makes energy. It can be used for energy, but some of the byproducts of its metabolism trigger a whole downstream sequence of events that leads to signaling processes that tell the body to store energy as fat, to reduce energy use by the body, and to conserve systems that are absolutely important for survival. So basically, it tells your body, store fat, don't burn fat, use very little energy, put your insulin resistance up so your brain's got enough glucose, put your blood pressure up so you continue to get the blood to tissues that are not working very hard because you're not using them, and put your inflammation up so you don't die of an infection while you're in this very specific state.
That very specific state does sound a lot like kind of emergency survival regimen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's exactly what you want to do. If you're going to survive a period where you haven't got very much food, for example, you want to hold on to the food you have. You don't want to waste your energy doing anything other than finding and storing food. And you want to make sure that you're not going to die in that period for something that you can prevent while running on low power mode.
Okay, yes. But I can immediately see some things there that make me think you wouldn't want to do that in the long term.
Yeah, exactly. Because what you need in order to survive a short-term situation is very different from what you want to be able to be to be able to grow and be healthy and have energy and feel, excited and motivated to do things other than find food.
Sure. Yes, and surviving in the long term means you don't want massively high blood pressure, and you
Exactly.
want lower inflammation than that kind of screaming high inflammation that you would need in the short term.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And sugar drives all of this.
Yes, so I said that the major chemical inside cells that drives this is fructose, which is half of sugar.
Right.
And you can get fructose inside your cells in one of two ways. One of them, really obviously, just as you said, is you eat a lot of sugar.
Okay, yeah, sure.
But two, there is another route by which, when you have a lot of glucose in your body, so that is
the other half.
the other half of the molecule, yep, or what you get from carbohydrates.
Oh, yeah, just like in the mouth.
Just like in the mouth. When you have a lot of glucose in your body, the cells convert about 3% of it to fructose inside the cells, called the polyol pathway. I didn't remember it from veterinary medicine, but actually when I looked back through my notes, it was there, so I just didn't really think it was important.
Sorbitol, something around the base.
Good. Yeah, absolutely.
I remember.
Well, so
Hidden in the
you have this route where some glucose is converted to fructose. And so the other way you can put fructose inside your cells is if you eat loads of refined carbohydrates, so you have a lot of glucose in your blood, or if you have if you have diabetes in general. But the enzyme that converts that glucose into fructose is called aldose reductase, and that is stimulated in a couple of other situations. So if you have a very high salt diet or you drink a lot of alcohol, both of those make your body think it's a bit dehydrated. That stimulates it. And there are a couple of other pieces too. But the really key thing is, you're probably thinking, oh, Gwen, you're talking about sugar, refined carbohydrates and salt. Those are like the real cornerstones of a Western diet. And that is a massive problem here.
Interesting. Of course, the three things that you need in order to make processed food actually work, the things that you need in order to achieve browning, crisping, shelf stability, flavor profiles that are stable over time.
Things that are cheap.
Things that are cheap and things that are addictive all feed into this pathway. Okay.
But what these researchers have said is that's not really a coincidence, that the body is very sensitive to those characteristics in food.
Yeah.
Because A, it means that they've often got a lot of energy, but B, because you often find them, or that those are stimuli that occur at a point before the body enters into a time that it's going to need to store energy. And that is the bit that is really counterintuitive, because you think, surely, if your body is starving, then, or you don't have enough food, then surely, well, actually, Greg, this is a primatology question. I'm going to hand it to you. Why is this good from an evolutionary sense?
Yeah, okay. Primatology extended all the way to anthropology here. I can see where you're going with this. These are all the markers of excess before a fall, right? These are the markers of harvest time in places that have seasons. Yeah. Or these are the markers of the end of the wet season in places that have a wet and dry cycle. They are the markers of, you better be storing food right now. Do not burn it, and get yourself ready, because you're about to enter a period of hardship.
Yeah, and I think one thing I hadn't really realised until I lived in tropical places is that fruit doesn't occur all year round, even if you've got loads of sun, because the trees want to capitalise on water availability and sunlight availability. On the tropics, sunlight availability is all there, so it's always about water. So wet season is green and lush, and you've got your trees absolutely going as fast as they can making fruit.
Yep.
And then you go into dry season, and by that point, they're not making anything.
And it's dust and crunch and hunger.
Right. Exactly. So I think that was the key bit for me. Like, oh my goodness, there is a peak of fruit and food availability wherever you are.
That's interesting. I wonder, so there will be places where it's always difficult.
Yeah.
Right? Places like the middle of Australia, places like the Sahara, places like the Andes.
Yeah.
I wonder if people who have lived there for a very long time have a slightly different biochemistry around this.
That's really interesting. I mean, the reason they think this is a particularly human problem, so this is not at all widespread across the species that we're more familiar with,
exactly,
is because there were a couple of mass extinctions of humanity, which that is where they trace back
the starvation of humanity.
Yeah, exactly. There are two, and they meant that we stopped being able to break down something called uric acid, so we lost that uricase gene.
Yeah.
And there was another one. So the researchers talk about it. A lot of these two genes are absolute bottlenecks in the human population. The only people who survived were the people with the mutations that gave them the ability to do exactly what we're talking about, which is why they don't think there's anyone who still has them. They may be wrong.
Well, they're probably right. They've checked them all. They have right.
Yeah.
I am here simply hypothesizing.
Yeah.
What I find really interesting about this is the parallels with the the Atlantic slave trade. You remember that people of West African ethnic origin have enormous rates of high blood pressure in the US, but people of West African origin still in West Africa, the exact same families have no raised blood pressure problems in West Africa. And if they have come over afterwards, they still don't have a raised blood pressure problem. And it looks like the slaves that survived the trip across the Atlantic were those that that would conserve enough salt.
Yeah.
Meaning that through the hundreds of years of man-made selection, really, we irrevocably altered the biochemistry of a group of people.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I guess it is that, isn't it? It's just that selection pressure.
Selection pressure through a bottleneck. Exactly what you were saying about about the starvations.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Where do we get to? Sugar feeds right into this.
Yeah.
Sugar sets you up to be in low power emergency survival mode, and that's a great thing for surviving hardship.
Yeah.
But it's a right pain for long-term health.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the other piece of it, I said there are a couple of different ways to get to fructose inside the cells.
Eating sugar is
only one of them. Also refined carbohydrates, diabetes, high salt diet, high alcohol consumption, and heat stress and low oxygen. Those are much more tissue specific.
Okay.
Quite a lot of them.
Quite a few, yeah.
But the reason that I really focus on sugar is that when scientists have tried to block the enzyme that converts glucose to fructose, so that other route in, the effects on metabolic syndrome are underwhelming, which suggests to me that dietary fructose is a much bigger driver than high blood glucose, although that is certainly a contributor.
Yeah, I mean, suggests to you that is very sound scientific sense.
Oh, exactly. Yes, it suggests to me. Yes, sorry, I'll take it on myself. So that is why we're talking about sugar, metabolic syndrome.
Yeah.
The reason that I really care about it is that the rates of problems are absolutely astronomical, Greg.
Yeah.
First, in the UK, I think it's something like 3% of children who are 7 years old eat less than the maximum thresholds set by the NHS for sugar. So it's only 3 in 100 children eat less sugar than the safe limit. So that's one. And the other point is in the US, they looked at a huge study where they said there are 5 different markers of metabolic syndrome. So this is raised blood cholesterol, blood glucose, waist circumference, high blood pressure, and abnormal blood lipids.
Okay.
5 of these. And they looked at a big sample and they said how many people are within the normal range on all 5 of them. And that was, again, around 5%. So we're talking in the US, more than 90% of adults are metabolically sick.
Yeah.
This is the single biggest driver of all of the new non-communicable diseases, huge suffering, early death. It is so enormous that it's actually hard to get your head around. And that is why I really, really care about helping people to understand why they need to reduce the amount of sugar that children eat and how to do it.
Okay. Well, we've talked about why.
Yeah.
What's the how?
So the how is, we've talked in previous podcasts and previous articles about the fact that sugar is addictive.
Sure.
It stimulates reward pathways really strongly. What does this mean in practice? It means in practice that children are less motivated by natural sources of sweetness like fruit. It makes them more likely to become picky eaters because they've got such a high threshold that they need in order to find reward in food. It also means that when you introduce sugar to a child at a young age, that child is really, really going to want more sugar.
Sure.
And we know why we can't just let children have a completely free access to sugar, because we know that it will make them sick early and throughout their lives.
I think it's fair to say that you can't let kids have free access to any addictive substance.
Yeah.
There's a reason we took their cigarettes away in 1908, right?
Absolutely.
There's you can have free reign to things, and free reign to choose things. You can find your own body's limits for stuff, unless that stuff gets right into your dopamine system, messes around with your understanding of what limits actually are, and wires you to be an addict.
Yeah.
So you don't give kids heroin, you don't give kids cocaine, you don't give kids alcohol or cigarettes.
Yeah.
You really shouldn't give them sugar.
Exactly. Because once they have tried sugar, they will want it more, and their brains are tricked into wanting it more. So then if you're an adult and you're saying, no, we can't have it now, we're not going to do this, we're only going to have it at birthdays or celebrations or anything, what you're doing is you then enter into conflict with your child, because your child wants more sugar, you want them to have less. When you're trying to make them have less, it can really boost their motivation, and that's how you end up with kids that will go out of sight and try and sneak food. It's how you end up with kids who go to birthday parties and cram cookies into their mouths. So introducing and then restricting is not an option. Introducing and not restricting is not an option, which is why the one remaining option, I think the really big thing that you can do for your children is just not introduce sugar in the first place.
Yeah. Now, listeners, we understand that the vast majority of people who listen to this already have kids, and the vast majority of those kids will already have been introduced to sugar. And that's not because you're all terrible parents. It's because the entire country, in fact the entire West, has been lied to about sugar by the sugar industry for the last 70 years. The amount of money that has gone into convincing parents, teachers, doctors, etc., that sugar is not only safe, but required, a real staple of childhood. In fact, you can't have a proper childhood without sugar, is astronomical. These people followed the tobacco industry's playbook to the letter and pushed an addictive substance on kids. This is not on you, this is on them, right? However, if you can find ways to reduce intake of kids who are already eating sugar, great. What we're saying here is that if you happen to have a kid who has never had sugar, the best thing you can do for their health throughout their entire life is not introduce them to sugar. Would you change that in any way, Gwen?
No, that was great.
Thanks. All right. We talked about exactly the biomechanics, really, of how sugar gets into your system and pushes you towards a low power emergency mode, which is great in the short term and death in the long term.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about the fact that you can't really expect normal behavior around an addictive substance, because that's the whole point of addictive substances. And we talked about how reducing sugar intake is hard work, and it is stressful, and it leads to conflict, and it's just hard work. I've done it myself. It sucks. I hated it.
Can I ask you actually, Greg, would you mind sharing a little bit of your personal experience? Because there'll be adults listening to this who think, oh, I eat a lot of sugar.
Do I want to talk about that? It was one of the most horrible experiences of my life. Fine. Okay, so I was raised on a normal 1980s high sugar diet. In fact, my mum's a scientist and read the evidence and said, you know what, this fructose stuff looks safer than normal sugar because it doesn't raise your glycemic index. It doesn't raise your blood glucose levels. It is therefore low glycemic index food. Let's go with pure fructose instead of table sugar, because she cares and she's a scientist, and she was wrong because she was lied to, as were a lot of medical type scientists back in the mid 80s. Anyway, raised on a high fructose diet, proper sugar addict coming out of school, very high fructose diet all the way through university, and I had raised liver enzymes, liver pain, low aerobic fitness despite enormous amounts of exercise, ridiculous appetite because sugar is an appetite stimulant. I had mad cravings. I still have mad cravings. I had even madder cravings. And, I was just going a little yellow in the eyes. And then Gwen read all of her evidence, didn't you, Gwen?
Mm-hmm.
And you said, oh, you should try quitting sugar. And I thought, well, I trust Gwen a lot because she's a good scientist. And I tried quitting sugar. And I suffered for about 2 weeks. I suffered with itching and grumpiness and dizziness and the horrible blurry vision sometimes. And various other symptoms I don't really want to talk about on the radio. Just hang on to the phrase that I suffered. But coming out of that, I found that my appetite dropped through the floor because I was no longer constantly eating an appetite stimulant. I found that my aerobic fitness went up and up and up without any extra effort, in fact, reduced effort, because my liver was working. My liver shrank, stopped hurting, my blood pressure came down away from scary blow your heart up levels down to normal levels. The pain went away. Everything got easier. I still have cravings. I will for the rest of my life because I was raised as an addict. But they're much easier to deal with now.
Do you remember, because I remember noticing this when I stopped eating sugar every day and ate it very intermittently, I can often feel the mood effects every day, because I remember you being like, oh my goodness.
Oh, yeah. So I get quite impressive sugar anxiety. So the day after, if I fall off the wagon, which occasionally I do and I try not to, the day after I get just mad anxiety / depressive symptoms. So I don't want to talk to people. I feel sad. I try and then attribute sadness and worry to actual real world things, whereas they're not. They're not really to do with real world things at all. It's just that I have pushed a bunch of inflammatory mediators around my blood by eating sugar the day before. Those inflammatory mediators go to my brain, and my brain goes, oh no, the world is ending. Maybe I hate everyone and everything.
And we didn't mention the mental health effects when we were talking earlier about all of the stuff there. We're in this mental health epidemic in young people, in children and young people. I was speaking to GPs yesterday who are seeing kids who are, 11, who with already mental health problems. There are many things that are affecting children's mental health, but we don't need to be adding sugar into the mix.
It's a bad catalyst on a bad fire. Let's put it that way. There are plenty of reasons, psychological, logical reasons to be upset at the moment, from the end of the world ecologically to political nonsense and the world being driven by rich dickheads. But you can make how you feel about that worse by having sugar.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think the only thing I would add before we wrap up this sugar section is that we had to make a deliberate choice with our older daughter for health reasons to not introduce sugar. So that actually drove us in a very useful direction, because it helped us to see the truth of what people told us. Because our child had a health problem, people didn't say. We weren't subject to the same thing where people go, oh, if you restrict sugar in childhood, they're going to become an adolescent that binges. Or I know this person who wasn't allowed sugar when they were a child.
And now they only
yeah, exactly, only Coca-Cola. But actually, what we found is it's been way easier than I expected.
Yeah.
I think, hearing all of the things, what are you going to do at birthday parties? Are you going to be there policing their school? No, we haven't done any of that.
Turns out to be really easy. Huh.
All we did was we made sure that we didn't have sugar in the house. We didn't ever have it for celebrations. We made different celebrations that were great. We asked nursery and schools not to give them sugar. But actually, we also talked to the children. If we pick up drink cans, we would smell them, we'd be like, ugh, it smells like medicine. Or if we tried sugar, we'd be like, oh, that's really sweet. Oh, taste it, that's disgusting.
Mock disgust is a very, very effective tool. If you're a grand actor such as myself, you can act being properly repulsed. even if inside you're like, oh, yeah, actually, that's a Freddo. I would have a Freddo. I would have 400 Freddos right now. But if you can act disgust and repulsed, kids lap it up and remember it.
Yeah.
That's great.
I've got a whole article, which I'll link to, about what we can learn from raising children who don't want to smoke and apply that to raising children who don't want to eat sugar.
Nice.
But the thing what I would say is if you are thinking about whether or not you want to introduce sugar to your child, and we don't have to think about long into the future, maybe it's just, I'm not going to do it for another week. I'm not going to do it for another month. That is all great. The longer you leave it.
A month is a significant win.
Yeah, exactly. Huge benefits. Then it's really not as hard as people would have you believe. You just make a decision, and actually once you've made that decision, you'll find that all the smaller decisions are much easier.
Yep.
Anything else you want to add before we finish on sugar?
I am already finished on sugar. Let's do a listener question.
Okay, so listener question this week. The question is, the Pikler approach says that babies should not be encouraged to move, should not ever be put into positions that they can't get into or out of themselves, and that they need to spend a lot of time on their backs on a firm, flat surface for their motor development. Why don't you favour this approach? Because your writing doesn't seem to favour this. Which is a great question. And the first thing I would say is that there's a lot that I do agree with in the Pikler approach, which was founded by a paediatrician called Dr. Emmy Pikler.
Amazing. I was really hoping this was named after a person, not just a cutesy baby word.
No, it isn't. But what she really, like the kind of core pieces of her approach, is that babies should be treated respectfully, that free movement is really important, and they should have a lot of uninterrupted play. So they shouldn't be
surface, no less.
Well, I mean, even uninterrupted play generally.
Okay.
But caregivers shouldn't be intervening all the time. She really pushed back against putting babies in devices and containers that make them move in a specific way, either deliberately or, by accident, things like car seats, pushchairs.
Bang on.
Which is great. So I'm absolutely all in favour of that. But I think there are a few of her the parts of the approach which I would say are just quite unusual from a biological perspective.
Yeah.
And those are that she does, or the approach talks a lot about floor-based time for babies. And that's a very Western thing. Actually, in many of the cultures we went into, you'd never put a baby on the floor. It would be a very strange thing to do.
Sure.
At least not until they were walking. And from a kind of evolutionary primate perspective, it is very strange. It would be very strange to not help your child's physical development at all. From a cultural perspective, virtually all other cultures help their babies to learn and to develop motor skills, because as soon as a baby is walking and able to move around of its own accord, that baby is then much more able to join in the activities of normal family life.
Yeah, I'm sure that the Piklers amongst us and our listeners would suggest that that the aim of letting them have time to themselves on the floor is to get them up and walking around sooner than any other approach.
Not sooner. I think the idea is that an idea that I've seen in other places as well, that there's this kind of inbuilt blueprint for movement, and the important thing is to let the child find their own, develop at exactly their own speed. I've seen it taken to extreme. I don't know. I think it's where science becomes philosophy. The kind of care and respect, treating the individual as an autonomous, treating an infant as an autonomous individual, means that then you might philosophically say that means that they shouldn't be helped. And I do, I heard of a family who didn't do anything to move their baby at all. And the baby did finally walk, I think they were about 18 months, which is quite late. They did get there. And so that was a sign then for them that actually, clearly a child can get to do all of that without help. But that doesn't mean that it's
Yeah, they could build their own car from first principles and smelt their own iron to make the cutlery. But we've done all that before. We can give them a shortcut to learning these things, and any other primate / mammal ever would do that for their offspring, because it's an enormous waste of time Then trying to figure things out from first principles.
Yeah, it's a waste of parenting. That's reason.
I know how to do that. I can show you how to do that. Learn from me. I learned from my father. He learned from his.
Yeah.
I didn't. I learned from my mother. I learned everything from my mother. And some things from you. You were telling me about a chimpanzee paper, weren't you, where they looked at how mothers were every single chimpanzee mother assessed was teaching their newborns how to stand, how to sit up, how to walk.
Yeah.
They all taught them how to move.
Absolutely. So they all taught them how to move from a young age. So yeah, they weren't getting newborns to walk per se, but they were doing various exercises, movements, holding them in different ways to simulate different movement patterns.
Yeah.
And it is completely universal. Chimpanzees being another primate that has babies that are not born completely movement competent.
Is that so? So, I'm
So
sorry.
rude, I know.
I should not. I had an ex-chimpanzee vet tease my wife, but I do. Okay, a fascinating listener question. If I'm summarizing correctly, you're right. We don't recommend the Pikler approach because it's mad. No, because we can teach and save a huge amount of time. And as we know in development, the sooner you do things like walking, the better your benefits in later life by quite a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wouldn't say we don't recommend the approach at all. That's not true.
Sure.
Jeff, there are certain elements that I think are not well supported by either the science or by looking at other cultures and other species that are similar.
I wonder if that question came a lot from the no flat heads because no lying on the back article.
Yeah.
And I wonder if the fact that they're recommending lying babies on their back on quite a firm surface, therefore driving that discomfort and that movement and preventing plagiocephaly by not lying them on a soft surface, is something that's quite an important distinction. There is a big difference in health terms between lying a baby on its back on a moderately firm surface and lying a baby on its back on a soft surface.
Great point.
One will flatten out its head and the other one won't.
Yeah, great point.
And it's not the one you think from, if you're an engineer. Okay, we've talked about sugar basically being the devil.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about not exposing children to addictive substances because you can't auto-regulate an addictive substance.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they're regulated by the state.
Mm-hmm.
Unless an industry has spent billions of pounds changing that.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about a couple of tricks for never having to deal with addicted children.
Yeah.
Them never having to deal with being addicts. Cool. This has been eye-opening. And I got to talk about chimpanzees. What a day. Loved it. Thank you very much. You have been listening to Growing Up Weird with me, Dr. Greg Dickens, and
Me, Dr. Gwen Bradbury.
have a great evening.
Bye.